to the world of DISC.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks everyone for joining us. This is really a fun topic. I love it. I've been using DISC probably daily since 2009 when I learned about it, so I hope that you find it as useful as I do. DISC to me really is about improving relationships with others and improving your ability to communicate with others, which is, ubiquitous, and it's you can't avoid the necessity of being able to talk with others and have them hear you and vice versa. So that's what this is all about. So we're going to move forward. Well, it would help if I would be in the right place here. Okay, so what we're going to do today is talk about what DISC is. It's an acronym that stands for 4 different traits that people tend to exhibit. I'll be sharing why we use it, why you might want to use it, and how we use it here at Arapahoe Libraries in Englewood. You'll be introduced to the 4 primary styles that are represented by the 4 letters D, I, S, and C. And you'll learn a little bit more about how to communicate with each style, and I have all kinds of resources to share with you too. So first, what is DISC? It's basically an inventory or an assessment that you would take, kind of like a test, and it identifies your behavioral preferences along 4 different scales. And it's based on the work of William Moulton Marston from back in 1928. And his work then transitioned into this DISC assessment. There are all kinds of free online DISC assessments that you can take, and there are also paid versions you can take. I have not taken the profiles on all of these free options, but I found them online and put them up there in case you don't have the budget. It's about, I think it's about $30 through Inkscape Publishing to take a DISC assessment. Depends on how many exams you order, so there are quantity discounts, but I think it was about $30 in the past. So these are just in alphabetical order, but you don't need to have taken a DISC assessment online for today's session. We're going to be able to help you out with that, whether you've taken it or not. But a DISC assessment is 28 forced choice questions where you'd be presented with 4 words and you would be asked to identify which word is most like you and which word is least like you. And after you've gone through 28 sets of 4 words, then you'd come up with a profile. Some of you may already noticed that there is a small I in DISC and that may be bothering you. I suspect if that does bother you, you have a high C behavioral style. The lowercase I has no meaning. It's just Inkscape Publishing's attempt to brand their information as different. It's kind of like Toys R Us that really is reversed when it should be Toys ARES. So just ignore the small I. So the purpose really of DISC is greater understanding and enhancing communications, and all that is to strengthen your relationships. So I am curious, Christine, if you want to put the poll up, how many of you have ever taken a DISC assessment? If you would quickly vote. Okay, good. So most people have not, which is fine. That's all right. If you have taken some kind of work style inventory, feel free to share the names of those inventories that you've taken in the chat window. Some of you may have taken the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI. That has some correlation to DISC. Strengths Finder, yeah, that's a good one, that's fun. Have any of you taken the, well, I forget, it's 4 colors. Not seeing that. Okay, So we've got a few, but that's all right. We're going to move ahead, and there's no problem with the fact that you haven't taken it, because we're going to jump right into that. So the idea of DISC really is that you learn about yourself, you learn about others, and the intent is that you would adapt your own behavior to accommodate the person that you're speaking to. So if you're married, for example, you've probably realized it's very difficult to change another person. So you can just possibly give up on that. DISC is about changing yourself so that you adapt your own behavior so that the person you're speaking with can get the message that you're intending to send. So we're really drinking the Kool-Aid here at Arapahoe Library District. I went through DISC training in Milwaukee, I think it was, in 2009. All of our leaders, so for us leaders are directors, managers, supervisors, and coordinators, have been through 2 days of DISC training. That was around 2010. And we continue to require all employees to take a 2-hour effective communication using DISC um, instructor-led course here at Arapahoe Library District. And people really love it. They get a lot out of it. So we're definitely on board with this. I have a handful of slides that have some quotes from some of the folks that I work with about what they've said it's done for them. And I thought you might enjoy reading those. I won't read them to you. I thought this was an interesting comment from a supervisor who is, ready to jump on the bandwagon with respect to change and very excited about change and ready to try things out. And she realizes that most of her team members are high C and S primary styles, which we'll learn about in a minute. And so that gives her a better appreciation on how she needs to slow down or how to pitch change that's coming their way to her team. Some of our supervisors are most mindful of using DISC and preparing for a conversation when it's something big coming, not for every conversation that you'd have at the water cooler, but for the big things. And this is a long one, but I thought it really represented how DISC can help. So people with a high C primary style really find data and authoritative sources very important. They're all about getting to the truth, and they're about why. And so this person was constantly sending her manager that kind of information. And the manager was apt to take that the wrong way. Like, do you not think that I know what I'm doing? And that really wasn't it. So it helps avoid some miscommunications. So if you took a DISC inventory, and if you took the one from Inscape Publishing, you would receive your results, and it would look something like this. So there are 4 scales. There's a D, an I, an S, and a C. And so people can fall anywhere from 1 to 7. You see those segments on the right, 1 through 7. 4 is considered average. Anyone who scores above 4, that's considered high, and anything 1, 2, or 3 is considered low. So also at the bottom, you might see reference in some of the reports to a classical pattern, because really people are more than one. A letter cannot describe a person, right? We're a little bit more complex than that. And even 4 letters can't really describe a person. But how the 4 letters interact and where a person lies on these 4 continuums, those things together generate a classical pattern. And there are 15 classical patterns, but that's pretty hard to wrap your head around in 15 minutes. So we're not even going to talk about classical patterns, only to say they really provide depth. And so if you decide to get into DISC, I think you can really learn from those classical patterns. But we're going to keep it very simple today and talk about D, I, S, and C. So you may be wondering, what is this all about? Is this reliable? Is this a reliable inventory? Is this a valid assessment? Well, reliability and validity are not really yes or no concepts. Can't really answer it that way, but I'm just going to make it quick and easy. And the answer is yes. Yes, these have been tested, and it is. DISC is both reliable and valid. So we're going to get right to it and see what your primary style is. And so if you could grab a piece of paper, or if you're eating your lunch, a napkin, draw on it, draw on your desk with a magic marker, make a plus sign if you would. I'll give you a second to grab a pen. All right, so you've got your plus sign, I hope. So what I'd like you to do is to place an X at either end of the y-axis, so the vertical axis. If you are more active, fast-paced, assertive, and bold, put an X at the top of the y-axis. But if you're more thoughtful, moderately paced, calm, and careful, put an X, if you would, at the bottom of the y-axis. All right, so hopefully everyone has their X at the top or the bottom. The second question I want to ask you is whether you are more questioning, logic focused, skeptical, and challenging. If that describes you in general, if you would put an X at the left side of your x-axis, so left, the horizontal axis. But if you're more accepting, people focused, receptive, and agreeable, if you would put an X at the right end of the x-axis, where I have it in pink. So here's the big reveal. If you look at the intersection of your two X's, so you can see if you had an X in the active and fast-paced area at the top of the vertical axis, and you put an X in the logic-oriented questioning axis, what's between those two axes is the letter D. That would be your primary style. On the other hand, if you're more people-oriented and accepting, more reserved and even paced, you're on that other end, you would be an S, and you can kind of see how that goes, I hope. So I'm curious, Christine, perhaps if you'd put up the poll, I'm curious. If you would, identify which of the letters your primary style fell into. This is so much fun, really interesting. Okay, so we have a lot of C's, a lot of S's, fewer I's, and a few D's. Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you. So here's what this means. This is a very general picture, the big picture of the four primary styles. So people with a high primary style of D tend to be outgoing and they're task-oriented. D stands for dominance, very goal-driven, quite direct, tend to be quite competitive. They're kind of, if they had a motto, just do it. After results, those are the high D folks. To the right of that is the I. I stands for influence, and these are the people. You know, if you're interviewing, sometimes people say that too. I'm a people person. So there are the I's. They also tend to be outgoing. So you'll notice that D's and I's share that common characteristic of being outgoing. They both have that. So people who are next to each other on this chart share something in common. The opposites have less in common. The I's are very talkative, often do a lot of verbal processing, might even change their mind in the middle of a conversation as they talk it through. They're thinking aloud. Talk with their hands, tend to be very spontaneous, often focused on fun. If you have a social committee at your library, these are the people who are signing up to be on the social committee. They have fun doing it. The S's share that people focus with the I's. S stands for steadiness. They're very stable, dependable, tend to be conservative and loyal, love to work together, very focused on harmony, definitely conflict avoiders in the S camp. So there's the S's. So the S's share the people focus with the I's, tend to be reserved, which they share with people who have a high C style, which C stands for compliance. These folks are very careful, logical, organized. I guess I have the British spelling there. Diplomatic. They're concerned with doing it right. And it did not surprise me when we just did our vote that the most frequently cited primary style for this group was C. I think, you know, libraries attract Cs because we're all about order. I mean, the whole thing about having a catalog and having things on a shelf, it's all about how can we find things right away. It's not just put the books out in any order. So I think Cs are often drawn to libraries. Okay, so it was interesting, those two questions that I asked supposedly come up with the correct primary style in about 88% of the time. So even if you didn't want to take the 28 store question inventory, those two questions would help you identify what someone else is. And you can use this to identify your coworkers in general. DISC is used heavily by companies for sales. But it's really helpful to start to read others. So as we go forward and we start to learn more about the 4 primary styles, think about someone you work with, maybe someone whom you find difficult in some way. Think also about the primary style that you just identified on the basis of those 2 questions. So watch for your primary style and watch for the likely primary style of the person that you've had some difficulty with in some way. So let's learn a little bit more about the D's. So D can stand for a number of D words. Dominant, direct, can be considered demanding, tend to be very decisive, determined, you know, they're the doers, definitely focused on results, you know, the bottom line, tend to be strong-willed, forceful, very much to the point, and they love challenges. So if you were to communicate with people who have a high D style, you would want to do a number of things. One thing you would do is to be concise and focused in your communication with this team member. So avoid rambling, and they're typically not into chit chat. They also don't want to receive a 50-page report. You know, these are the folks who are going to go straight to the executive summary and try to look at the big picture. They're very bored, are often bored by detail. So if you're speaking to someone who's a D, keep your email short, to the point, bottom line, results oriented, very concise. Be open to aiding this person in the decision-making process rather than coming to this person with a decision already made. D's tend to like to make their own decisions, so you could perhaps come with a suggestion on what you think would work, but D's often like to have that control. If you're disagreeing with someone who has a high D style, make sure you're disagreeing with the facts in the matter and making sure that you're directing your disagreement not at the individual. Keep it at the facts because these folks want to win. I think uh, President Trump is probably our most notorious primary style D person in the news right now. So never mind ideology, President Trump, I would say, is clearly a high D. High I, on the other hand, I can stand is for influence. So these people really do want to convince you that what they're saying is the way we should go. They're very interactive. They're very interested in people, very sociable and outgoing, enthusiastic, very optimistic. Um, Tend to jump on the bandwagon very soon on things. They can see everything working. This is great. I'm on board. Um, Very lively. They love being on teams, and they're very open about sharing and motivating others. An I, whom you might recognize from the celebrity world, is Dolly Parton, right? So upbeat, always smiling. Um, I think she's a very typical I. So if you work with someone who's an I, um, it's really important for you to be personable with them. So if you waltz into their office, be sure that you warm up with a little chit chat. Don't get straight down to business. If it's Monday morning, you need to talk about what this person did on the weekend. Did they have a good weekend? What did they do? They're the ones who are going to want to talk about that. It's possible that eyes will completely derail the conversation because they're so talkative. So when you're speaking with them, it helps to be able to keep them on track. If a decision needs to be made, it's helpful to make it by the end of the communication and then follow up in writing. Eyes are sometimes seen as a little bit disorganized, and so you can help them along by putting things in writing, having action plans when you end a meeting. I don't know if you've been to meetings where there are no minutes taken, and then everyone's a little on different pages about what exactly was decided, if anything, and who's going to do what. So the eyes especially benefit from minutes and action and dates, and they need that organization. So if you're discussing ideas with someone who has a high primary style of I, you can support your point of view with testimonials given by people that this staff member particularly admires or respects. Because these folks, people matter to them, and so if you talk to people, they can hear that. Okay, so the S folks, S stands for steadiness. It can also stand for the S words that you see in the first bullet. Very supportive. These are great service staff. Very stable, steady, sincere. Tend to like the status quo. Often have very specialized positions where they're experts at this, what they specialize in. Great team players. Very focused on harmony. Definite conflict avoiders, but seen as very cooperative, very even-tempered. These are the people you work with that nothing ever seems to bother them. They're the same temperature every day of the week. Very patient, tend to be very tactful, often good listeners. So they're on the people side of the spectrum too, enjoy people. They're pretty much behind the scenes folks and not in a place where things change all the time. That's a little bit upsetting to the S's. So rather than tell you how you would alter your communication style to reach someone who's high S, tell me in chat, if you would, what you think would work best to communicate with high S style folks. Okay, I'm seeing a couple things explaining why. Yeah, that can help. Um, S folks are often very focused on process, so they're interested immediately on how things are going to work, but it doesn't hurt to get into the why as well. They're behind the scenes, so they don't always enjoy public recognition, so speaking to them in private is good. Transparency, absolutely, face to face, keeping them informed, time to listen. Yeah, so these S's are on the slower pace side of things, so they really can like time to ponder, not just waltz into their office and say, what do you think? Telling the steps, Aaron B, that's great. Absolutely into the steps. Great. Okay, that's right. So you would, it's similar to the influence. They need a little friendly conversation before leading, getting right into business. So these folks, too, you acknowledge that they have a life outside of work, ask them how their evening went, how was their vacation, where'd you go. Um, these S's like to be listened to, so give them time to think through things if they need that. They don't really want to be rushed or forced into a decision right away, and it's good to stay true to your word, avoiding empty promises. That would be true, I guess, for everyone. Okay. High C's. Okay, C stands for conscientiousness. They tend to be more cautious. Um, Often they're the ones who like to do calculations. They tend to be the data folks. They think about things. Very competent. Perfection is important to this group. They want to be right. There is a right answer and they're going to get to it. They appreciate rules and they understand the reason for rules. So um, if they understand why the rules in place, tend to be very compliant, often more contemplative, careful about what they say, um, analytical, precise, private. You may not know anything about their private lives because they don't share anything with you about their private lives. Very systematic, very focused on quality and details and accuracy. Um, so how do you think it would be best to approach someone who had a high C primary style? What would you do to communicate with them? Facts and figures, yeah, for sure. C's definitely want to know why. If things are going to change, there needs to be a good reason for it. And you need to be able to share that with them. If you're explaining that you're going to change the way something's going to be done, you have to have a good reason for it. And they want the reason. Whereas the S's are more likely to accept it. The C's are questioning. They're on the questioning side of things. Definitely want time to think. So it's great to send C's, actually everyone, but send C's the agenda in advance. And if you're going to ask them to weigh in on an issue at a meeting, let them know in advance what that issue is going to be so they can think about it and prepare their response. C's are often very, very quiet and also tend to be known as the passive aggressive quadrant. So don't mistake silence for acquiescence. It doesn't mean if someone's silent that they agree with what's being said in the meeting. They're just not prepared to say anything about it. Um, Respect their personal space. You know, these are not the huggy folks. The huggers are the I's. You know, they never met someone they didn't like the I's. Well, the C's. So if you want to talk about trust and DISC, with the exception of the C's, people tend to instantly trust people who are like themselves. So the D's trust people who behave in a dominant manner. The I's tend to instantly trust the people who are open and friendly and enthusiastic. The S's trust people like themselves, and the C's trust no one instantly. You have to earn their trust. So it just doesn't come naturally. So in these really very brief introductions to the 4 styles, you probably noticed there were several flattering traits, maybe things you would consider compliments or complimentary words, and perhaps some that were less flattering. So as you can imagine, every style has its strengths and it has its weaknesses. And even a strength, when it's used excessively or inappropriately, can be perceived as a weakness. But the good news about this, we all have good and bad in our personality traits, is that we can change our behavior. And so when you are preparing for a conversation, you're going to pitch a new idea. Maybe it's for a new program. Maybe it's a different way to break down your reference statistics and all the data you collect regularly. And you anticipate some pushback from that. That would be a time when you would think about who's coming to the meeting and think about what would land on the audience in a way that they can hear it. I'm going to explore, though, this idea of strengths and weaknesses, if we could, for a minute. So Christine's going to put up chat windows. So I'd like you to pick a window, and I've put in each window a trait from each style. So I'd like you to share in these windows when you think being direct is a weakness, when you think being enthusiastic could be a weakness, when you think it's not to in someone's best interest to be patient all the time, and then in the 4th quadrant is accurate. When could it be a weakness to be focused on accuracy? So I'm curious to see if you can see these words, which on the face of it might sound great, how they could actually be a weakness. These are great, thank you. I can't wait to review these in more detail. Yeah, these are great. While you're typing, we had a full day session with our leaders, and so there are the eyes in their corner, and they're thrilled and chatting, and they're talking to each other, and we posed to the group, when is it over the top to be too enthusiastic? And so if you think about the matrix, I's and C's are opposite each other. And so the C's perceive the I's as fake. How could someone possibly be that happy, that chatty, that enthusiastic and positive? They don't see it as real. And that was real news to the I's who genuinely are like that. The D's are done with any exercise. If you put them in a table together, they're done in like 1/4 the time as the other tables. They just get right straight to it. Boom, get their bullet points, that's up. And the I's are drawing all over the paper. The S's don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and so they're making sure they're capturing everything. C's are very organized. They're not all over the paper. They're very rigid in how they're putting stuff up. So let's take a look. So the direct, when can it be a weakness to be too direct? Ooh, right. If you're not considering how other people might be feeling about the issue, it can come off as a steamroller. They can be perceived as too blunt. So it's very interesting. D's are talking to each other, they get it, and they're not put off by that at all. But especially the S's can often perceive D's as steamrollers, like, wow, can you lighten this up a little? This is over the top. They can seem pushy. They can hurt feelings, yeah, especially if they're giving tough news. Need to be pulling back on that and acknowledging how people might be taking it. Could be seen, Sally said tactless, could be seen as tactless. D's can sometimes be seen as someone who's oblivious to and uncaring about other people's opinions, and they could just set everyone against them. Yeah, so being direct can be a great trait to have and to be in a certain situation. And if it's used all the time or at inappropriate times, that's how it comes out. That's great. Great job. So let's look at the enthusiastic. Too cheerful. Yeah. Now there are morning people, and when it's too early in the morning, some people don't get going until about 11 o'clock, and they don't really like this morning cheeriness. It's possible that if someone's high I and they're initially enthusiastic about something, they haven't maybe thought the whole thing through, right? It may be that there are people on the team who are really not on board, that have serious reservations, and it'll seem crazy to the others if someone's overly enthusiastic about it. Not everyone's geared up for change. The I's tend to like change. They see that as fun, and that is absolutely not the case for S's and C's. So this might be the time to dial it back. Not everything is a cheerful topic. If you have layoffs, not cheerful. It may end up being the best thing that ever happened to someone, but at that moment that they learn that they're being laid off, certainly not the time to be cheerful and telling them it's going to be great. I love that, Karen. You said it could be perceived as artificial or goody two shoes. Yep. Fake. Yep. So, right, it might seem that you're not serious about anything. So that's a downside of being enthusiastic. Great. I'm going to skip to the patient, which is an S. So when is it not good to be too patient? When it becomes passivity, right? There may be times when you have to step up and say what you think and not accept. It may be that things take too long. Patience could be seen as laziness if you don't have a sense of urgency. If you're a supervisor and certain things need to be happening and they're not, at some point the patience has to run out and the people who report to you need to step up and do the work. Can be seen, definitely S's can be seen as indecisive, and that kind of drives the D's crazy. It may be that you don't want S's in the emergency room, not the ones who are wanting to make instantaneous decisions. It may be that you're waiting for someone to do something, but really you're concerned about it not happening at all, and it's time to follow up. So it's time to drop the patience and get on it. Yeah. Good. Okay. And the final area is accuracy. Those are the people with high C style. Over research. Yeah, it's overwhelming, isn't it? I mean, with the internet, there's no end to what you can find in books and articles and so forth. Well, you can research something to death. and never finish. Right. It may be that perfection is what is the only thing that will move a project forward, and that means it never moves forward because you can never reach that state of perfection. Yeah. It's possible for C's, it's great, Erin, to lose sight of the big picture and the larger priorities because you're hung up on a certain thing. I love that, Electra. Perfect can be the enemy of done. Yep, yep. Um, C's often hold people to their standards. That's a great point, Jean Marie. Uh, and others don't reach those standards, and then that causes conflict. Pointing out errors can appear insensitive. Overcorrecting, for sure. Um, yeah, I mean, it's great to think about who you're talking to and what they need, not what you are. Not what you are, but where are they? That's great. Thank you, Christine. If we could go back to the PowerPoint. Great. So anything that's a positive can be a negative if misused. So it's great. We all have these strengths. We all have weaknesses, and it's the skill comes in when to use each trait. Some of you might be reeling from the implication that you can be defined by a letter, and you absolutely cannot really be defined by a letter. Every person is unique. Snowflakes are unique, supposedly. I don't know that, but you are unique and you are more than a letter, and you are the expert on you. So what I just said about each style represents people who are really high, like in the 7th segment of each of those. And each of us has other possibly high styles, secondary styles, and it's where we are on the spectrum of all 4 continua that determine where we are. So I'm acknowledging here, you're more than a letter. Everyone's more than a letter. And I actually think it's most difficult to identify the primary style of the people you know best. And I think that's because you see the complexity of their personality. You know quite a bit about them and you see the whole range. And I kind of think it's very hard with people you know very well to identify the primary trait. But the idea of DISC is that you're changing your communication to match the receiver's style. And we do that naturally. We do it with children and we do it with dogs. You would not say to a dog, "Hey, Max, with the pretty tail, how about instead of getting on the couch, if you would go over to that red rug near the door and plop down there?" The dog wouldn't have any idea what you're saying. I mean, they might recognize a few words, but you don't speak like that to a dog. You'd say, "Lie down." That's it, because they understand what that is. And so the concept is similar. You're going to change how you like to receive information, change and get out of your own mindset and think about who you're speaking with. And so here's a little chart that shows the primary, and this kind of boils it down, very simple, what people are focused on. So the D's are all about what? What is this going to do for me? If you propose a change, the D's are going to want to know, what's this going to do for the library if we do this? What impact is this going to have on us? The I's might want to know, who else is doing this? Oh, Pikes Peak is doing this. Oh, High Plains does this. That's going to carry weight with the people who have a high primary I. They're very interested in knowing who else has adopted this idea, who else is doing it, especially if they're respected peers. Or who else is on board? Oh, Cindy said she liked that. That's a great idea. Oh, okay. The S's immediately go to how. Personally, I'm a very high S, high C, and a high I, and I'm a 1 on a D. And I know in my conversations, someone will say something, and I instantly roll right to the how we can make that happen. maybe forgetting whether we should make it happen, I'm already on into implementation and the steps. So S's are often very process oriented. And if you're communicating a new idea to people who are S's, you will want to have pre-thought out the logistics, the nitty gritty of how this will impact X. What are we going to do with I? The nuts and bolts need to be worked out for the S's. The Y's will be stuck at why we're doing this in the first place. And so if you're presenting a new idea, there needs to be a really good reason for the C's to get on board. They're focused on why are we doing this. So if there's a reorganization happening, if you're changing anything, absolutely the C's are going to want to know why this is happening. One thing I think that's really helpful to make DISC a positive in your institution, if you decide to adopt this and use this, you do get a common language. But I think it's worth being very mindful about not using the letters as labels and instead talking about the behavior. So instead of saying to someone, uh, you know, well, you're being a D, stop being such a D. It would be more effective and sound less accusatory if you would instead state the behavior that's upsetting rather than, throwing the letter out. For example, you could say, I think you're focusing a little bit too much on the results when in this case, the means of how we reach the end really matter. Could we talk a bit more about how we might accomplish the results you're seeking? Because you don't want to put people on the defensive. So be very careful. It's easy to talk in letters because we have that common frame, common language. But if you're in a dicey conversation where people are emotional or feelings might get hurt, I would stay away from the labels and talk about the behavior. A little bit more on this is, it's all about meeting the other person's needs and tailoring what you're doing to match their preferences. And it's important to get to know people. So at Arapahoe Libraries, all of our employees take the DISC inventory, and then we place on in a centralized location where every employee can get to it. We put everyone's primary DISC style up so that I mean, we expect people to use this. So for us, it's a matter of internal customer service, how to get along with people that maybe are unlike you, who have a different focus. For sure, don't expect any more or less from someone based on their DISC information. I wouldn't use DISC as a decision-making matter. Um, I wouldn't use it for hiring. I don't think you shouldn't be dismissive or underestimate what people can do because they're DISC information. So Ds, I think, can often rise to the top because of their traits, personality traits. But it's nice to have a blend of all styles because everyone brings something different to the table that is of value. And so it's important to look at people beyond their DISC style. I'm curious, so now that you know a little bit more about the four primary styles, if you think back to that person that you identified earlier, someone that was you found a little bit hard to work with, were they diagonally opposite from you? And I think we have a poll about that. So the diagonally opposite people are D's and S's are diagonally opposite, and I's and C's. So I'm curious, think about someone you kind of don't jive with. Are they diagonally opposite from you on a DISC quadrant? Yeah, so that's interesting. So the majority are saying yes. It just kind of rub you the wrong way because they're so unlike you. But hopefully this has helped you see how you can communicate with them in a way that they can hear you. And if everyone in your organization understands DISC, then they'll be doing the same for you. Okay, thanks, Christine. That's great. So this is kind of a nice fleshing out of the 4 quadrants and what people share. So you can see that D's and I's share the trait of action. These are the action people. And on the bottom end, the C's and S's tend to be more stable. The I's and S's on the right are very collaborative, tend to like to work collaboratively. D's and C's enjoy a challenge. And then what you see in the, for example, results, enthusiasm, support, and accuracy, that would be something that just that style tends to focus on. So that can help you. If you're talking to someone about an idea and you know they're enthusiastic about it, and that's not you, it would behoove you to try to generate some enthusiasm as you go in to talk about that, because that's what they expect. They react positively to that. So rather than shooting the idea down, which you may want to be, maybe that's the point of your conversations, you want to point out some of the aspects of it that you think are not going to work, but sharing enthusiasm for the idea in general, just some little things that you think could be better, so you can see how you can pitch it. If you're talking to S's, these folks want to be supportive, and so if you flat out ask them, I really need your support on this, that's what they're good at. That's what they're all about. I need this. I need you. You can see how this can work. So I'm curious, what primary styles do you think are most attracted to library work? And Christine has a poll about this, and I'm going to share with you our breakdown here at Arapahoe Libraries.
And Jane, we had a question in the chat about, can your dominant letter change over time, such as it?
Yeah, that's a good question. What I've read is that it tends not to, and where the primary, I'm glad you brought that up, people tend to be exhibiting their primary style most heavily, I guess I'd say, when they're under stress. So this is where you would tend to go under stress. And so I'm told that over time there's very little shift. But, we're all in charge of our behavior. So it may not be our preference, but we can all choose to be something that we're not for a short time. But if you're under stress, that's where your comfort level is, your primary style. And I'm told that it tends not to change over time. It's your preference. It's your behavioral preference, and your preference would not change. So that's interesting, S's and C's, and that's what I would have guessed as well. At Arapahoe Libraries, we tend to hire people for our floor positions that do not have library experience, and I think we're tending to see more I's because we want them to be friendly and open and greeting people and making small talk and so forth. But still, for us, 32% of our workforce right now has a high primary style C, 30% are S's, 25% are I's, and 13% are D's. Yeah, it's interesting. Good, thank you very much. Wow, and we're almost done. So DISC has great value for teams and just in general, if you're assigning tasks to people, the styles that tend to work best together are shown at the top. And then the least likely is I's. And I'm curious if you have any ideas on why that might be. I think it's because they are chatting. They're not working. They're talking. They're talking and talking and not completing anything. Right. One other thing you'll see about folks who work well together is the S's, because they're so easy to work with. S's work with everyone, so they're very easy to put on a team and get something done. This is in the resources, so I'm not going to spend time, but what I hope you take away is there is no good style. There is no best style. Flexibility is important, cohesiveness, quality, confidence, all these things are important, and people bring to teams different traits that are of value. As leaders, there's a different look at what leaders bring to the team or to an organization when they have different styles. So it isn't, you wouldn't want an organization of all one style. And every library has a culture. And there's a downside to that and there's a positive to that. And so that's an interesting thing also to consider. And of course, this webinar will be archived, but I have 2 slides here with all kinds of resources for you. So, questions before we wrap up. It went by so quickly.